Good evening and welcome to another video by awakentheworld.com. My name is Garen and tonight we're going to be talking about sacrifice. Uh, Sacrifice is a funny word actually. It tends to conjure up images of young virgins being tied to stakes or someone plunging a knife into uh, uh, another one of those virgins or perhaps an animal. And the origins of sacrifice in 13th century Latin really mean to perform priestly duties or to give of oneself. And that's actually closer to the real definition of sacrifice than uh, what's currently accepted as sacrifice. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Um, the giving is not about this giving or sacrifice is not about killing. It's not about objects. It's not about leaving flowers on an altar or anything else. Even though we can find everything from food to flowers and assorted other things on altars all over the world, that isn't the real point of sacrifice. The concept of sacrifice gets even more confusing with the advent of modern day monotheistic religions. And if you're not sure what monotheism is, it's a concept that there's one deity, one God, instead of many gods. Now, somehow, according to and keep in mind that the three major faiths all recognize the God of Abraham. So the, apparently, this version of God um, used to get his kicks out of blood sacrifice, big time. As a matter of fact, he demanded it. It could be your firstborn. It could be the nice little lamb you had over there. Uh, it could be an entire city that he wanted you to raise down. But he demanded blood sacrifice. Now, the really funny thing about this is I've always wondered if you're the creative entity in the universe and you created the whole universe and therefore you own the whole of creation or are the whole of creation, what possible pleasure could you take out of the killing of part of your creation? What possible good could come out of for you as the creative deity by having someone sacrifice what you already have to you? I mean, wouldn't it be easier just to take them yourself? And what good would it do? I mean, I never did really understand that, to be honest with you. Pretty much anything that bled, that had to be laid on the altar sooner or later. Now, of course, this became warped and twisted over time as the priests and other people in power realized that if there was someone in the community or or someone in power that wasn't aligned with their point of view, their religion, their course, boy, they would do pretty well on the sacrificial table, and they'd find a way to get them there. And sure enough, there was always enough people around who had vested interest in helping that happen. And it happened time and time again, especially during the Inquisition, for example. Um, Anyways, I don't want to get too far off topic. Back to sacrifice. The truth of sacrifice is that the creative essence of the universe demands nothing from us because it is all. Everything is contained within itself. To demand something from something inside of itself that's part of itself makes no sense. It just doesn't. I'm sorry. Almost as much no nonsense, right? No sense, nonsense, as the missing pineapple on that side behind me. In case you didn't notice, I hate to say, but the pineapple died today. He was sacrificed, and we did indeed eat him, and he was really good. There's some of them left in the fridge. Uh, what we're invited to do in our lives is sacrifice our desire to control, to understand that our higher self, that which is indeed an individuated part of the creative essence of the all of it, okay, uh, knows what's best for you. And when you sacrifice your desire to control and to manipulate existence, you find suddenly that your path begins to smooth out. Not only that, you're not worrying as much. The divine invites us to sacrifice fear and guilt in its infinite love. It holds nothing against you. You should hold nothing against yourself. The divine invites us to sacrifice our egos, not so that the ego may die, but so that the ego may be made whole again and return to its proper function, which is to serve us. These are the things that sacrifice actually means. When we sacrifice to another person, we're giving of ourselves to ourselves. In the same way that the Creator, in creating all of us within itself, has the opportunity to gaze upon itself, to be amazed at the beauty and feel awe at a sunrise. Those are all those wonderful parts of what it means for us to be here. The sacrifice is never a bad word. The only thing that feels it's giving something up is the ego, the small sense of self, that which you not really are. You know, in the next video, we're going to talk about surrender, and surrender is a full-time verb, literally a full-time verb. Sacrifice can be a noun, but surrender is pure action, and it's all the time. But there is a similarity, and the similarity is this, is when we sacrifice or surrender our own thoughts about how things are, when we enable ourselves to step back, when we realize that we have just a sliver of the total amount of information about what's really going on around us. An example, our eyes see around 2% of the light spectrum. That means 98% of our visible world around us is invisible, hidden from view. We live on the shallowest peel on the outside edge of a magnificent juicy orange. So, you know, when we're talking about sacrifice, or the word surrender, we are literally talking about letting go of our own desires, letting go of our, it doesn't mean you don't honor your desires, but you understand what your desires are actually for. See, as I've said in the video on desires, and I'll just repeat that here, your egoic desires aren't the desires for the objects. They're not the desires for the things. They're the ego's desire for that feeling of wholeness again, one way or the other. And when you sacrifice those desires, when you no longer chase those desires, when you sacrifice your wanting of something in the hopes that it is going to bring fulfillment, and then sacrifice your own sense of self to the universe. In that moment of pure surrender, in that moment where you metaphorically plunge the knife into the false heart of self, not your true heart, but I'm not going to use the word heart. When you plunge the dagger into the stomach of the false self, metaphysically, of course, okay, you open the door for grace. You open the door for the creative essence of the universe to say, okay, now we can get back online with things because I have such grand plans for you. Stop thinking you're so small. You're bigger than you realize. You're more magnificent than you realize. You're more powerful than you realize. True strength, true ability to sail through life and enjoy the calmness of the seas comes from our willingness to sacrifice. We need to sacrifice everything, including our concepts, our beliefs, what we think we know, and instead open ourselves to the idea that when we think we've reached the limit, there's another billion miles to go. And this is a gift that we are, and this is a gift that we have. That's it for tonight. We're going to wrap up this discussion on sacrifice. At the end of the day, sacrifice is for ourselves. You cannot ever say, I'm sacrificing something for someone else. There is no someone else. You're giving up from yourself to yourself. And hopefully that can allow you to turn it in from an experience that may have some painful overtones because you feel you're taking a piece away from you and handing it to someone else, and instead realize that all you're doing is sharing with yourself. And that feels really good. So get used to sacrifice. I mean, it's not like the old days when you were going to get tied to stakes and horrible things done to you. Now you just have to be willing to give to yourself. Have a wonderful night, and we'll talk to you again soon. This is Garen for awakentheworld.ca.